They say peace is a quiet thing. It doesn't roar like a boardroom victory, and it doesn't shine like a penthouse skyline. For 5 years, Alexander Sterling, the man who once owned the world, found his peace in the smell of sawdust and the sound of a little boy's laughter. He had traded his $10,000 suits for flannel and denim. His hands, once soft and manicured, were now calloused from building custom furniture in a small, quiet town 200 miles away from his former life. A sunlit, dusty woodworking shop. Alexander is sanding down a beautiful wooden rocking horse. A 5-year-old boy, Leo, runs into the shop, covered in mud, laughing. Elena walks in right behind him, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. She smiles warmly at Alexander. He wipes the sweat from his brow, picks up his son, and kisses Elena. The picture of absolute, modest perfection. Elena had become the anchor of his soul. Together, they built a life that money couldn't touch. No press, no paparazzi, no ruthless corporate warfare, just a family, breathing free air. But there is a brutal law of the universe that powerful men always forget. You can walk away from the throne, but the crown still casts a long, dark shadow. The warm acoustic music slowly fades out. The low, ominous rumble of a heavy engine approaches. The crunch of expensive tires on a gravel driveway. Alexander looks out the dusty window of his shop. His smile vanishes. The color drains from his face. 3 sleek black armored SUVs pull up to his modest front yard. The illusion of safety shattered in an instant. Alexander's blood turned to ice. He didn't need to see the license plates to know who it was. The past had finally found him. The door of the lead SUV opens. A man steps out. He is wearing a flawless charcoal gray suit. He looks exactly like the man Alexander used to be. This is Marcus Thorne, Alexander's former protege, the ruthless shark who devoured Alexander's empire when he walked away. Marcus Thorne, the man Alexander had trained to be a monster. When Alexander abandoned his empire for Elena, Marcus gladly took the reins, but empires are hungry things, and Marcus had come to collect the one thing he couldn't take by force. Alexander immediately steps in front of Elena and Leo, his body tense, shielding them. Marcus walks into the wood shop, looking around with sheer disgust at the sawdust and simple tools. He stops a few feet from Alexander, a predatory smile on his face. "Look at you," Marcus sneered, his voice dripping with venom. The great Alexander Sterling, reduced to playing a carpenter in the dirt. Alexander didn't flinch. His voice dropped to that terrifying, deadly whisper he hadn't used in 5 years. "Get off my property, Marcus, before I bury you under it." Marcus laughs, a dry, humorless sound. He pulls a thick black leather folder from his jacket and tosses it onto Alexander's workbench. But Marcus hadn't come for a fight. He had come with a leash. "You left a mess when you ran away, Alex," Marcus said, tapping the folder. "You locked the offshore contingency funds behind a biometric failsafe. $300 billion, frozen. I need your thumbprint and I need your signature, today." Alexander shakes his head, refusing. And he tells Marcus he left that money behind and he wants nothing to do with it. Marcus's smile disappears. His eyes flick over to Elena and then down to 5-year-old Leo. Marcus stepped closer, the air in the room growing suffocatingly cold. "You misunderstand," Marcus whispered. "This isn't a negotiation. I bought the bank that holds the mortgage to this entire town. I bought the supply chains that deliver food to your local grocery store. If you don't sign this over to me right now, I will systematically erase this town from the map. I will make sure your beautiful wife and your precious son spend the rest of their lives sleeping on the street. You thought you could just leave the game? You are the game." Elena grabs Alexander's arm, her eyes wide with fear. The peaceful life they built is crumbling in seconds, and Alexander looks down at his hands, the calloused hands of a father. Then he looks at Marcus. A terrifying transformation happens in Alexander's eyes. The carpenter vanishes. The trillionaire awakens. In that moment, Alexander realized the heartbreaking truth. He couldn't protect his family as a simple carpenter. To save the angels in his life, he was going to have to resurrect the demon he used to be. But this time, the monster wasn't fighting for greed. He was fighting for blood. Alexander picks up the black folder. He looks Marcus dead in the eye. "Give me 24 hours, Alexander says. Marcus smirks, turning around and walking back to his SUV. "See you in the city, Alex. Don't be late." The SUVs drive away, leaving a cloud of dust. Alexander turns to Elena. She is crying, knowing what this means. But he holds her face in his hands. "I have to go back," Alexander whispered, his forehead resting against hers. "Just for one day. I have to tear down the empire I built, or it will crush us." Elena held him tight, terrified that the city would change him back into the cold man he once was. "Promise me," she cried. "Promise me you'll come back to us." Alexander kissed his son's forehead. "I swear it on my life. 24 hours. That's all Alexander had to dismantle the empire he spent 15 years building. He didn't go home to pack a bag. He didn't say goodbye to Elena. He simply drove through the night, back to the glittering city he had abandoned 5 years ago. The moment his heavy boots stepped onto the polished marble of Sterling Tower, the humble carpenter vanished. The trillionaire was reborn. And he was out for blood. Alexander walks through the soaring glass lobby of his former headquarters. Security guards, men who haven't seen him in half a decade, instantly part like the Red Sea, terrified of the cold, dead look in his eyes. He steps into the private executive elevator. As the silver doors slide shut, we see his reflection. His jaw is locked. The warmth is gone. The first call he made wasn't to a lawyer. It was to his former chief financial officer, Richard Chen. "Richard?" Alexander's voice cracked like a whip through the phone. "I need you to liquidate everything, every stock, every offshore bond, every real estate holding across the eastern seaboard. I want it all converted to cash within 12 hours. Richard's voice trembled on the other end. "Sir, dumping that much volume, it will crash the global markets. It will completely destroy the company." Alexander's response was ice cold. "Good. That is exactly the point." A rapid, terrifying montage. Red numbers flashing across trading floors. Stockbrokers screaming into phones, ripping off their ties. News anchors breaking into programming to report the catastrophic, unprecedented collapse of Sterling Industries. Billions of dollars are evaporating into thin air in real time. The financial world is in absolute, uncontrollable chaos. Alexander wasn't just burning his own empire to the ground. He was laying a massive, unavoidable trap. He knew Marcus Thorne had been quietly over-leveraging his own assets to buy up Sterling's stock, betting on a slow, immensely profitable takeover. But as the stock price violently collapsed to zero, Marcus's investments became worthless overnight, and the predator had just become the prey. Marcus Thorne sits in his lavish penthouse office, staring at his multi-monitor setup in absolute paralyzing horror. The lines on the graphs are free-falling. His phone rings. The caller ID simply says, "Sterling." Alexander stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his old office, looking down at the panicked city. "Hello, Marcus," Alexander whispered, his voice carrying the terrifying weight of a man who had absolutely nothing left to lose. "You wanted to play games with my family? Let me show you what happens when you threaten the only thing I actually value." Marcus tried to stammer out a threat, but Alexander cut him off. "I've just liquidated every single asset you were counting on to keep your creditors at bay. Your empire was built on sand, Marcus, and I just summoned the ocean. You have exactly 6 hours to leave this country, or I will personally ensure that every financial institution and criminal organization that owes me a favor knows exactly where to find you." Marcus's face goes completely white. The phone slips from his trembling hand. He realizes he picked a fight with a man who had already won the war before the first shot was fired. But as Alexander hung up the phone, something completely unexpected happened. He didn't feel victorious. He felt hollow. He looked around at the cold, empty penthouse, the exact room where he had handed Elena divorce papers 5 years ago. He realized something terrifying. The monster was still inside him. The city was waking it up. Alexander's hands begin to shake. The adrenaline fades, leaving behind a profound, terrifying emptiness. He pulls out his cell phone and dials the only number that matters. Elena answers on the first ring, her voice tight with unspoken terror. "I'm scared," Elena whispered through the phone, the sound of their son playing softly in the background. "I'm scared you're not coming back to us. I'm scared that city is going to swallow you whole again." Alexander closed his eyes, a single tear cutting through his cold facade. "I'm scared too," he admitted, his voice breaking. "But I need you to understand something, Elena. I didn't come back here to be the trillionaire. I came back here to protect my world. You and Leo are my world, and I will burn this entire city to the ground before I let anyone touch you." Elena is sitting on the porch of their small house, holding Leo tight. She closes her eyes, crying, but a profound sense of relief washes over her face. Alexander spent the next 18 hours systematically dismantling every single trap Marcus had set. He quietly bought back the bank that held the mortgage to their small town. He secured the supply chains. He didn't just protect his own family, he protected the entire community of ordinary, hard-working people who had welcomed him when he was nothing but a broken man trying to rebuild his soul. By dawn, the dust has settled. Alexander stands in the lobby of Sterling Tower one last time. He drops his master keycard into a nearby trash can. He walks out the glass doors, stepping into the rising sun, leaving behind a legacy of ash and ultimate redemption. He never looks back. Some men build empires and lose their families in the process. And some men lose their empires and are lucky enough to find their families. But Alexander Sterling did something far more rare. He learned the greatest psychological truth of all. True power isn't measured in dollars or dominance or skylines. True power is having the profound strength to walk away from everything you've ever built, to protect the only thing that actually matters. Alexander's dusty truck pulls into his driveway just as the morning light breaks over the trees. Elena and Leo are waiting on the porch. Leo runs down the steps, screaming, "Daddy!" Alexander drops to his knees, scooping the boy up, burying his face in his son's shoulder. Elena walks down the steps, tears streaming down her face, and wraps her arms around both of them. Marcus Thorne fled the country a broken, penniless man, and the financial markets eventually recovered. The world moved on. But in a small, quiet town, 200 miles away from the glittering towers of power, a man who once owned the entire world finally understood what it meant to be rich. The trillionaire's echo faded into silence. And in that silence, he finally found peace.